So first of all, a big thank you, to the Ocean people for coming up for this AMA. Quite excited to to have a chat for the next hour and talk about Ocean. So as a member of the Token Engineering Academy, I've been studying a bit of Ocean during the curricula. So I'm quite happy to do actually quite happy that I've done a deep dive with tokenomics DAO with the article, and then again you guys agreed to do this AMA. So uh, I want to just maybe get started with a personal anecdote. So there's this friend of mine. His basically working on an LLM, and last week he basically came to me telling me, "Hey, I have this problem. Like, I can't find good data online." And he knows that I'm working with three, and so he was asking me about Ocean. And so he basically told me that it seems like SEO has ruined web browsing. And so basically now you're not finding the good data anymore. Now you find the blog posts that basically recycle data, and so you can't really find the original data online anymore. And that's a problem if you use data to train models. And so I wanted to start from this anecdote to maybe have you guys introduce what's Ocean objective function, let me call it that way, or the aim of what Ocean is doing.
Sure. It's a really cool anecdote to start with. The objective aim of Ocean Protocol in general is to increase the supply of useful data and AI services and assets for people to be able to share kind of and retain their right to them. And so the fully objective measure is just increase the supply of useful data, useful models that can be built on top to facilitate some type of useful service.
Awesome. And so I think it's really cool that Ocean is at the intersection of two big fields that are quite hot right now, that are Web3 and AI. And so it's something that was asking is like, how would you guys explain Ocean to someone in the AI field, because and to someone in the crypto field? Why do you think AI needs blockchain, and why do you think why do you also think it's true the other way around? What is the value proposition for each of these two fields, given that you guys are at the intersection of it too?
Now, for AI, crypto is really, it's like the way you can train AI and they're able to kind of control their actions. And so we would say in the future world, we're going to have a place where kind of every individual and business is going to have multiple kind of LLMs and foundation models that they are kind of using for their daily tasks, whether it be as an assistant or just kind of helping them with their scheduling, what have you. And so in order to really allow these agents to, and kind of AI to really do their work, be able to transact on your behalf, be able to interact with other tools, there needs to be a clear hierarchy of what access of capital do they have, can they use to transact, what are the access control rules they can do. And so right now, when you try to build these things only in the Web 2 world, you have to rely on kind of proprietary systems of the access controls of what you're built on. So you need to trust kind of AWS's account or Azure, Google Cloud, or whatever provider you use to ensure their access control conditions are met, and you have to learn their proprietary method. Then in order to allow them to transact, you need to give them access to your bank account, which kind of there's a very limited ability of how well you can kind of code with moving along, using traditional finance rails. And so with Ocean, what you're able to do is kind of leverage NFT and ERC20 standards to kind of wrap your access control in there. So now for all of your data assets and kind of AI services, their access control and ownership is used as a standard of NFTs. And so everyone can now interact and build on each other with interoperability by leveraging kind of a common standard that everyone kind of can use, as opposed to having to manage a bunch of different types of proprietary ones. And you'll be able to, and what we can also do is kind of give them constrained conditions. Okay, you can only access this wallet and spend for these purposes, or for be able to transact with these amount of tools, or use my data for X purpose. So crypto really acts as the ability to have a standard way of controlling and sharing your access control to your assets.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And it's basically the ownership layer that you add on top that makes that would potentially make AI work even better. And like in my opinion, something really interesting is that now we have even machines that are spitting out data constantly, and so enabling that kind of like ownership directly into the machine level, using some tools that Ocean provides is something that for me, it's really really exciting. Um, so you just briefly introduced NFTs and tokens, and so maybe for someone that in our audience that doesn't know exactly what you're referring to, can you provide just a simple explanation of what are data NFTs and data tokens in the context of Ocean protocols and how they relate to the architecture of the Ocean system?
Yeah, data tokens, data NFTs, we can say, or I'll leave that to Chris. But the original question was, why does AI need blockchain and why does blockchain need AI? And to summarize the topic is artificial intelligence needs data and it needs a lot of it. And right now it's really hard, as Chris just said, in Web 2 guardrails to get data to feed large language models or computation methods or any type of machine learning algorithm. These AI models and these AI agents, right? These machines that are spitting out data and performing tasks and completing X, Y, or Z function. They don't transact in fiat, right? So that's where the whole crypto thing comes in, is that these AI agents aren't going to go, hand paper cash to each other and say, "Oh, come do this task for me," right? It will be online digital currency, and that's cryptocurrency, right? So blockchain needs the artificial intelligence, in my opinion, to scale, right? But artificial intelligence needs blockchain, number one, for data, and number two, to be able to transact with one another. How this happens is data tokens and data NFTs, which is where Ocean comes in as sort of this access layer in the real place to be able to own the output on the internet, right? This is beyond just data sets or beyond algorithms. This is like individuals and businesses. They have a lot of data, but the only issue is they don't know what to do with it, right? They don't know how to monetize it. But yeah, how we do this is with data tokens and data NFTs, which I will pause for the next question.
Awesome. And yeah, and so going back a little bit from NFTs and ERC20s, and so one thing that the Ocean Core team noticed, like that when they're kind of building up this whole data economy, is there needs to be kind of like a incredibly neutral way of defining ownership across many different types of systems. And then around the 2020, like when NFTs start taking off, we kind of realize we can leverage these already existing standards for this purpose. So an NFT is a token standard that kind of creates a one-of-one, like right, and kind of hash of like, okay, this token there's only one of this. And so that kind of mechanism works really well for representing ownership. So ownership pragmatically is really just having a bundle of rights to what you can do with an asset. And so what you do is with that NFT is it represents your base IP ownership of an asset, such as a data set or a service, and defines the rights that you are allowed to do with it, whether it be transferring it or downloading it. And so that asset can be a CSV file, or it could be an API endpoint, or it could be kind of like a different model. Basically, the NFT you points to where the data is held off chain, whether it be an S3 or in like an IPFS, Filecoin, Arweave, and that kind of link to it is encrypted and held on chain, so that the kind of owner is able to define their ownership of this asset when this is where it is. Then the ERC20 components really come in to allow for flexible access control. And so, okay, I've created my one NFT for my asset, and this allows me to have ownership. Now I want to define who is allowed to perform actions on it, whether they can download it or they can run a compute job on it. And so ERC20s, you can create multiple different types of fungible sub-licenses against your base IP, which, okay, if I purchase this ERC20, this gives me the right to download this asset for the next 5 days. Or if I purchase this other data token, I have the right to run computations on it for the next 1 month. And so it kind of allows people to kind of create many different types of fungible sub licenses against their NFT. And
We might have just lost them.
I thought it was me. Okay, yeah, no problem.
I think the whole these data tokens and these data NFTs, right? They're tokens and NFTs as tool mechanisms, right? Less about price movement or pump or liquidity, and more about like how we can use them in an interchangeable world, right? And how we can perform data and computations on the data set without revealing privacy, right? Because we live in a world right now where anytime we log into a Web 2 platform, we don't have control of that, right? So this gives the idea that, the owner of the data can allow who gets to use it, why they get to use it. There's time parameters about, if I have all this sensitive medical data and I want to run an algorithm or compute jobs on it, I purchase that from the owners themselves, right? Or these concepts of data DAOs or data unions that cohesively group their data, right? And then I can run compute jobs on it. And that comes, at the lack of someone else's privacy. I think it's worth noting that it's never able to be seen. We'll dive into computed data later, but the ability to run computations is how that data stays private. The point is being these NFTs and these tokens allow for tool mechanisms, and that's really what Ocean Protocol is at large, is this decade-long experiment of Web3, blockchain, and artificial intelligence toolkits, right, and open source mechanisms to be able to spin business cases, perform tasks, and just create this new realm of business. Can everybody hear me? And I'm worried now that I'm gonna block
I
out.
can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, so I think the way you also explain it in white paper is quite clear. Like you have basically data NFTs that are the base IP license, and so it's basically you make the parallel with the music industry. So you basically create a song, and that's the data NFT. That's basically the asset. And then to provide different type of access, you create a tokens, and so people can spend the token to either get access to the data or the so-called what do you call the computed data. So basically being able to do some computation, run some computation on the data. And I think one really interesting application is I work with medical data. And so in that case, for instance, you might want to preserve the privacy of the data and sometimes like even the content of the data itself, but you might want to allow people to use some data to run some computation on them. In the case of they're developing some algorithm for example predictive medicine or stuff like that. So I think that's really that's really interesting. That's, I would say, the core value prop that you guys are offering. This two asset model where the base asset is the one that the people are basically creating, but then they can they can leverage that asset to basically get interest from the community to use the asset that they publish. And I think this is a good way to introduce the computed data. So you said that you're able to preserve privacy in computed data. This might be overly technical for me, and I'm not exactly from the sector. But can you tell us a bit more about how do you preserve the privacy? So like I can run some algorithm. I never see the data. I just see the outcome of what my algorithm spits out basically.
Right. And so computed data is basically a framework to allow connecting kind of assets published on the ocean with kind of like the ability to, with computing access, like in major clouds or eventually other ones. So the basic way it works is anyone can run their own computed data environment in which we have things to set it up. So when you run a compute job, what happens is the data and the algorithm are brought together within kind of a Docker container, and then the algorithm is run on the data set, and then only the outputs are sent back to the buyer. And so the purchaser doesn't ever actually see the data itself. They're only able to retain the outputs of the model they ran. And so a user is able to set it up and so that the data never actually leaves like kind of their system. It's only kind of algorithmized only.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so that explains why would someone want to use computed data over owning some data. Maybe they're not interested in the ownership, and they're interested in the just the computational part. But in that case, they have they need basically the poster of, and we'll get into how that process actually happened. But let's say that I want to run some computation on some data. I need the poster of the data to be able to have basically the poster of the data needed to have created the associated data tokens that allows for that specific action, right? Because from what I got is the data tokens provide specific access. And so it is the owner of the data that decides if they want to put out only tokens that allow to basically download the data set, but or also tokens that allow computed data, right? They're two different tokens basically.
Right, exactly. And it's like what we really encourage is like the amount of privacy you want for your assets and algorithms, it's up to the user to define that. So they can have it completely open where anyone is able to download it like when they want for the X price, or you can be much more secure where it's like, okay, only algorithms and compute jobs are allowed to be run. I'm only ones that I specifically whitelist and like can inspect the algorithms to make sure they're okay. Only they are allowed to run. Like, and so you're able to have greater flexibility on terms of how you're doing it. And then you can do some interesting stuff like, okay, like back to your example on medical data. Let's say you have a very like high valuable like medical data set that you think would be useful for both commercial and academic purposes. You can create two different types of sublicenses to really allow that flexibility. So you might have one sublicense that allows anyone to run compute jobs for free, but they need to kind of prove they have a academic credential of some type of university of some sort. And you might have another data token that someone has to purchase access to run a compute job, but in exchange, you're able to use that for commercial purposes. And so you're able to really attach the licenses of kind of what you want from there, like to the data tokens. And then one of the really cool aspects of kind of compute the data and where it kind of adds a lot of value is kind of the full, like the provenance of kind of how models are run. And so take like an example, let's say like kind of a full LLM. What we can do is like have a data set and kind of prove how it was created. You can put in the methodology, publish as an asset. And let's say you want to then start a training job to kind of like train a foundation model or just to fine tune one. When you run the compute job, you can have your final output be like a new fine tuned model that will have provenance to prove this model was created by running like this algorithm on this data set. And so having that full provenance will allow much greater trust in kind of the algorithms you're interacting with. Like one of the major problems is like when you see all these AI startups, like what model are they running under the hood? Like, okay, they say they fine tuned it. Is it really that good? Or are they like feeding me like a really cheap model, even though I'm paying for an expensive one? Having that full trust and provenance of how the model is created and like what you're actually purchasing will go a long way in kind of making the utility of community data clear.
Yeah, because I also bet we'll get to a point where the technology behind the LLM will kind of like level off, and so the real asset behind the LLM is actually the data, and so being able to transparently see where the data is being trained on would probably make a big difference. I guess.
Yeah, right now the big proprietary ones are the most popular ones. They're the cheapest to use, easiest to use through simple API. People like OpenAI handle all the infrastructure for like running that API. But in the future, I don't like the future isn't really going to be many people all using their own these proprietary ones. For many individuals and business use cases, you need like very high quality fine-tuned data for very specific tasks, and typically a smaller model for that. And so we'll see instead like many thousands of different open source models all fine-tuned on data sets for a very specific like task, such as question answering for shipping in the New York region, or being able to conduct law in this specific region in France. And so the opportunities will be for individuals right now that are kind of have industry knowledge in those industries, massive opportunity for them to kind of curate these high quality data sets and be able to allow others to use it to fine tune their models and like be paid for it like on there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And something that I was kind of thinking about right now is in like when you provide basically the download option, do you guys have anything in place that basically does not allow other people to re-upload the same data set? Like, is there a way for you guys to spot, or for the market participants to spot kind of like a duplicate and being able to recognize maybe I guess it's just going to be on the data that on the date when the data set is published. But like, is there a way to like avoid people to basically spam the market with basically duplicates of data that are already existing in the market?
So there are very much a few mechanisms to combat against this. And so there's never going to be a full like, if you allow your data set to be downloaded, there's never going to be like a full technical way to like silver bullet that can like automatically define, okay, this data set's a copy, you can't do it. Maybe eventually like they can always like switch their wallets. So the best kind of courses against that is like on kind of like the license side, and then social signals. So number one, you're able to attach a license to any asset you publish on Ocean, and so if you publish that and allow it for download, you can specifically tie the license allowing what they can when they download it. So they would have like kind of recourse if someone starts selling like a copied data set that prove they're like breaching the license. And another aspect is kind of on the social curation signal, where if I'm a reputable seller, I've like created my data set, I've like docked myself, I've shown like how it's created. And so and then from that, if you're a successful seller, people will be able to stake on your data set with using kind of with VOcean data forming, which we'll probably get into a little later. And those can act as a social signal that this is a high quality data set. They have a history of sales, and like you can prove how many sales they've had, who's downloaded it. So over time, if like someone just copies that data set and tries to sell it, you kind of want to leverage the social signals to show, okay, no need to buy from this guy. It's like a derivative data set. They've like taken it, and so they won't have kind of the social history of selling that allows them to have more trust. Because when people want to purchase data and like use it in their businesses, they need to have full confidence that they are allowed to, and they're not going to suddenly like find themselves in breach of it. And only from the original seller is the only one going to have like that full kind of license to show that.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I would say like what I find the most unique about Ocean, and that could be because like I had to kind of like read it and study it for the course, is that the care being put into its token design, following basically the engineering principles is something really quite unique. And so Trent said that in designing the protocol, so he first analyzed some available token models. So for example, TCRs. So for the public, token curated registries and curation markets. But then basically he realized he had to come up with a new model, and that's basically what I think it is. You guys have now. It's basically the curated proofs market. So if any of you guys want to explain to our audience in simple words what a curated proofs market is, and that's basically referring to what Christian was talking about right now, the social signaling.
Yeah, so a lot of this frameworks for like kind of for these kind of social proof market, we're able to be add together and right now into our data farming. So the basic idea for that is that in order for kind of selling on the market, there's like kind of you're able to kind of utilize both the expectation of selling. So a user kind of publishes a very high quality data set for the first time on a market, and so they kind of show that they believe that's going to be very well. So people can kind of believe, okay, this is a reputable seller. Like I followed his work before. This data set is likely going to be very popular, so they can kind of stake on that in anticipation of downstream sales. So that acts as a pre-signal that, okay, this is probably a good data set. Like people who are trusting their capital and like betting on this to do well. Then after there's a history of sales, you also get the great aspect of, okay, not only do people signaling that this is a good data set, it also has a pure history of sales, people using this data set, not encountering problems, believing that it had the data that it said it did. And so you're able to kind of get both, where both people are able to anticipate quality data sets and signal to that. And then after the fact, we can leverage the blockchain to be able to prove the value of it with like kind of verified sales statistics.
In regular business terms, right, the ability to stake tokens and data farming mechanisms on a high quality data set is a residual revenue share, right, is what it comes down to, right, is any person that the publisher owns a data set, right, but you are applicable to a percent of that revenue share if you devote X tokens or X allocation to that data set. And then you are now, it's almost like, think about a real estate investment trust where like you're earning capital on this. This is a mechanism to distribute and fairly distribute rewards, fees, almost like a dividend share.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I can have this parallel in mind. It might be a stupid one, but I think about it when I go to TripAdvisor. I look at restaurants. I see one with like really high review, really high ratings. I was like, okay, I'm willing to stake my money. That's like this is a good one. And then I asked a friend of mine to go there, have lunch, and tell me how that was. And he was like, yeah, that was a good one. And so that's kind of like the social proof. And again, it could be a stupid parallel, but I think it might make sense to think about it in these terms. For kind of like a simple way to see it is you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, and then have that potentially confirmed by actually seeing the data, using the data, and so on. So if I were to be the owner of a really good data set, and I wanted to publish that on Ocean. Okay, you guys have your Ocean markets. Could you tell me what should I do? How would that work for me if I were to have that data set that I want to publish and I want to potentially earn on that data set?
Yeah, you have the data set and you want to monetize it, right? You want to treat it almost like an asset, and then you want to earn capital on it. So the market function is one of these crazy, alternative mechanisms to monetize your data and start earning and helping other people earn, right? So if you had this data set, you would go to market.oceanprotocol.com, you'd follow the steps, publishing, you'd set the parameters on who gets to access it. Is it free? Does it come at a price? Is it a fixed price? You can, as Christian just said, you can put time parameters on it if it's sensitive, so you have the ability to allow people to access your data set for 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, infinitely, right? But the steps included are in the documentation if you go to docs.oceanprotocol.com, which we can get more into, but the steps are clearly defined on how to upload your data set, where you want it to be stored, how you want it to be access controlled. Follow the steps, and then minting it, right? So minting requires two transactions to be signed through your Web3 wallet, MetaMask for an example. Minting that NFT then gives you in your wallet, the DID, ownership access to that, right? So then it's publicly available in the market. So you say, hey, I have this monetized data set and my friend wants to use it, right? You can just point him to the Ocean Marketplace and the URL link that attaches X data set.
Yeah, and something to add to that is within the kind of data value creation loop, when we say that, it's the kind of the process in which data kind of gains more value as it gets more downstream. So starting with like kind of the business use case, what do we want to achieve? Then you starting with raw data to clean data to a trained model to a fine-tuned model to kind of like an application utilizing the model. And so the key part is starting with the business context. And so, hey, it's like, let's say I want to improve the ability to provide parametric insurance to a particular region of farmers, or I want to be able to efficiently LP into an Uniswap. So from them, then they decide, okay, I'm going to curate a really good data set for this. I've like kind of got all my sources, and now I've created a data set that can be very effectively used for a particular region to predict what the drought risk, or predict or to be able to kind of figure out how to best LP into Uniswap. So a cool thing you can do is also work with us to kind of launch a data challenge. So what happens with this is we kind of highlight the kind of data set, then explain, okay, this is your target, this is what your target, this is what you need to build a model for LPing into Uniswap, or for predicting this kind of drought risk. So then then people will build kind of downstream models on top, and then what we can do from there is then connect it to kind of like businesses that can make use of it. So a parametric insurance provider might want to take the outputs of those models to effectively price the risk of providing their insurance products, or a trader might want to utilize the model to improve how well they stake in. And so the best way to kind of like increase the monetization for the asset is to first provide business context of why is it useful. And then you can to accelerate the process, you can like help sponsor a data challenge to utilize people like building businesses on top.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As for the data challenge, where's that coming from? Is that part of the Ocean DAO initiatives? Is that promoted by the protocol itself? Is that promoted by the DAO? If someone wants to be involved in the data challenge, what they should do.
So OPF is itself is the ones running our data challenges. So anyone wants to get in touch, like they can, our docs, there's a form they can kind of fill out. They basically, all they need to do is explain kind of like what is the kind of like business use case they want to do for it, and then whether they have the data already or if they need to go find it. They kind of explain, this is the data set I have, and what we would do then is kind of like just create the challenge around it and work with them on kind of marketing it out, and then figure out what type of prizes to do, and then we kind of just launch the challenge. And this can be done on any platform, whether you want. It's just the core part is the data sets and algorithms are being published to Ocean as kind of an immutable like registry of like submissions and ownership.
Awesome,
yeah,
awesome.
Data challenges for organizations that have data is a way to monetize it and to be able to create assumptions, metrics, and basically pull-offs from the data, right? And the whole idea is to enable data scientists and individuals, university students, people that want to practice their skills, right? To run computations, to create models, and to answer more qualitative and quantitative questions based on the data set. The data set is the thesis that it's published to the Ocean market, and it's used where the data comes from, and then seeing this whole, as Chris mentioned, the data value creation loop. It starts with where does the data come from and what you want to get out of it. And these data challenges are really good examples to show how data can be put to work and how you can make assumptions and pull off of them. And, you can plug and play this formula into a plethora of different use cases, right? Talk about supply chain, talk about sentiment analysis, talking about one we have coming up is studying temperature and humidity in certain regions or indoors or in transportation mechanisms. It's all about where the data comes from and how to put it to work, right? And these are sponsored initiatives through Ocean Protocol to engage and empower the data scientist.
Okay, so when you say putting data to work, just wanted to recap what we said until now. So basically, we've analyzed, I would say, the perspective of someone that has the data available, that want to publish the data. So they want to do so. They publish a data set on the ocean market, and they are able to put this to work. How does that work on the other side of the equation? So someone that is basically the staker, because I think there's two interesting elements here. The first one is that if I remember correctly, you guys had liquidity pools, and so something that it's more familiar, I would say, in DeFi terms, but then decided to move away from that and then introduce the VE model and the data farming. So I feel like that was a big transition. And so if you maybe want to spend some time talking about what it actually what it practically means to putting those data to work from the side of like someone that wants to stake on this valuable data that they that they can find data to be valuable, basically.
Yeah, so the dynamic pools were kind of a way to kind of leverage DeFi to allow for new pricing models for kind of data. So basically what happened when you kind of create a data token, each one was basically its own AMM, which kind of allowed for dynamic pricing of data, so that if like data sets like that were very highly that had a lot of traction, we're able to kind of have allow the market to decide how valuable it should be worth, because one of the toughest challenges is pricing data. And so it also kind of allowed the ability to kind of like speculate on data assets, like, oh, if I'm going to buy this data token now, and I bet it's going to have a lot of traction, and so and the price will go up. However, the reason we kind of went away from that is for right now, I'm not sure if like kind of market was fully ready for this pricing mechanism because of how kind of challenging just even straightforward kind of monetization and like creation of value creation of data is. And so when across all the data pools, there wasn't really enough like full liquidity like to really facilitate this to the best degree across them, since like smaller data sets might only have like a certain amount of stakers to begin with, and those stakers, because they're actually LPing, might have been subject to impairment loss risk. And so we kind of paused that for now, and we moved over to the VE Ocean model, which kind of like eliminates any impairment loss risk for stakers. And so now when they stake on that set, they're really just kind of pointing to it and like kind of curating it, as opposed to acting as a literal LP.
Yeah, micro AMMs for each of these data sets was an experiment. The experiment proved that it was not quite sustainable, and the goal here is to last for 100 years, right? And not just get a quick buck and not just try to earn or scrape exit liquidity. Moving away to the VE token economics model provides one of the only no impermanent loss staking mechanisms in all of DeFi. Data farming is similar to this traditional liquidity mining or yield farming you'd see in other decentralized protocols, but it's tuned to this idea of data consumed volume that Chris just mentioned, and assets and revenue that's shared through consuming volume in the marketplace and data assets and data token NFTs, right? So this whole program rewards stakers with Ocean to allocate voting power and curate data assets with high data consumed volume.
Okay, and so basically that's where basically the two function of the VE model, the VE token model comes in. So you have, if I'm right, the passive kind of like rewards for just staking, as it happens with the traditional VE token model. But then you can also earn on top of that like a boost. I would say like a boost of the rewards if you decide to actually to be actively involved in basically the curation of the data sets and the signaling. Right.
Right. So there's two mechanisms that you can earn through data farming. One is active and one is passive. Right. Passive rewards are off-chain yield that's distributed to all VE Ocean token holders, active rewards are when you allocate to a data set and you stake, this is the, put your money where your mouth is, right? There's a super valuable data set, or it's scraping all this, valuable information that, you might think that finds demand, allocate to that, and then you get a piece of all the fees that are generated through purchasing and the allocation of others consuming that data set, right? So two different active and passive ways to earn with Ocean through data farming, by this VE token economics model and active and passive rewards.
Yeah, and that also makes it pretty open, pretty inclusive for people, for different kind of like markets participants, people that just want to earn some passive rewards, and those that want to be more actively involved. I guess it also depends on like the skills. Like you might be able to contribute actively only if you're good at actually spotting, the right data sets, right? Because that's all a game of like, I know that this data set will do well for this and this reason. So you might also need a skill set to basically be able to determine which data sets are going to do well and which doesn't. So another thing I wanted to ask is that you said you're moving away also from liquidity pools for like a reason of like liquidity might that be traction among different fields, given that you guys are operating in the wide data economy, the data ecosystem. I wanted to ask you if you see from a personal experience, if there's a sector in particular where you guys at Ocean are seeing particular traction, meaning interest for the data sets, and where maybe you're noticing a lack of traction. So basically, two sides of the same coin, the same activity on the data sets, basically.
Yeah, the goal is finding data with value, right? So we're seeing that come from raw data and foundation models, and then the spin-off to this is fine-tuning foundation models is where the most traction has been. Experimenting in the last decade, there's been a lot of financial data, there's been a lot of transaction data, there's been a lot of healthcare experiments and supply chain stuff, but the question really becomes, what do the masses want or see valuable? So we're seeing this through LLMs and computing methods, and Christian can kind of dive into like actually taking the foundation model from the Ocean market, fine tuning it, and spitting out outputs of large data sets, general purpose sort of technologies. So it seems like the more niche, the less demand or fine-tuned demand, and the more like general purpose and actually putting it to a business case is finding traction as far as like what's being purchased, what's being consumed, where is demand coming from. Keep in mind it's a bear market, and keep in mind people don't really know how to own data or use data or put it to work, right? So these are decade-long issues that we're just kind of experimenting with and testing what works and what isn't going to work. But those are like the plus and minuses of what's been going well and what hasn't been going well.
Yeah, and as Nick said, like kind of like two main areas where we kind of see the most kind of like usage and like attraction for that is one is around DeFi, and like that's where like tabular data. So kind of on-chain data is really valuable because users and consumers of those assets and services are just more crypto native, and they understand kind of the concept of how to purchase a data token, how to use MetaMask, and because of like how also available like the data is, where people are able to kind of curate very large ones, and we start seeing some more people interested in building models kind of around predicting token prices, like we have our data challenges for Predict ETH. And another area we're seeing a lot more interest is in kind of like in foundation models and the whole process around kind of like curating data sets and fine tuning them. And this is, I think, because of the very unique and kind of challenging nature of them, where how do you track like IP rights, like who is really entitled to downstream like royalties of like of the output. Hey, if you trained your model on my IP, like who is entitled to the downstream like outputs of that? Is it the person who paid for the compute? Is it the person who paid for the data, who trained the model? And so the fact that there's so many complicated stakeholders within LLMs, it's like there's a lot more interest in using Ocean for this purpose, is because we're very well suited to kind of like managing these very complicated stakeholders by kind of leveraging like standards of ownership across all of them. It makes it easier to facilitate these kind of like new, like novel kind of models of like for sharing like IP rights across all of them. And so kind of a lot more traction there.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And in terms of the difference between data providers and data consumers, are you are you seeing more kind of like supply of data and that data being used, or do you see more maybe through the data challenges, the difficulty in being actually finding the right providers of data, because especially since data are becoming quite an asset for people to have, are you finding more difficult to actually find the people that are able to provide the right data sets to put in the markets?
Finding the data publishers has been less of the issue because we're having all these inbound inquiries of people that have mass data sets and they don't really know what to do with it. So this is kind of where Ocean Protocol comes in and says X, Y, and Z is what you can do with it, right? Is what you can do with it. You can monetize it, you can run compute on it, you can sell it to industry partners, you can allow this interaction in a private and secure way to share the data, right? The data challenges are more spun to the individual data scientists or the organization's data science team to experiment with the tool sets and practice these tools for the end user experience and kind of what results are you seeing from this computing power, right? The ability to see X, the ability to have all this data from all these different places and then run algorithms and make assumptions and fuel data informed decisions, right? We can say from 1, 2, 3, 4 hospital, let's say we're looking for water contamination within like 100 kilometers of a certain radius. Without seeing that data, the end user wants to know where's the water leak, right? So the in this example, the publisher would be the people, the hospitals or the insurance companies or the organizations that are this data DAO, right? These data unions that are holding all their data and they know it has value, right? So that kind of gets into where the data comes from. There's lots of organizations, there's lots of enterprises, there's lots of data DAOs and unions that have these precious data, right? Sensitive personal data or information data or supply chain metric data. They don't want to know what to do with it, right? So that has been less of the problem. And then the data challenges and these practices are how to actually pull assumptions, value, business cases, and make decisions.
Right, exactly. It's kind of almost like a twofold problem, or there's like kind of technical challenge of like just sharing access to data, connecting to compute resources, and that's the part that's almost like simpler because that's already kind of being solved by Ocean, like that's the infrastructure. The more challenging part is almost more on the business side of connecting and kind of creating the right context of okay, the data set's there, I can purchase it, great. Like why would I, or what's the value around it? What can I use it for? So a lot of our job is kind of helping to connect, like, okay, like people, data engineers that can kind of curate useful data sets with business cases for them to kind of like build the data sets for, and then downstream with data scientists and application developers that can take those outputs and turn it into and bring it back into the business. And so the more challenging part is really aligning all the stakeholders together to work on a common problem, and less so on like the technical challenge of actually sharing and selling the data itself.
Yeah, and that also makes sense. Having basically one niche potentially taking traction before some others, because you need the two sides of the equation. So you need the data providers that are actually providing quality data, but you also need the people that can understand the business context of the data and being able to use basically spend their data tokens to access the data and use them for their intended purpose. So as for my last I would say technical questions on data tokens is exactly on spending data tokens. And so right now, when you and had this question pop up when I was writing the article, right now when you spend the data tokens, basically the owner receives the tokens back and they decide to do what they want with it. So either keeping the tokens, putting the tokens back in the market. And my question is, since these tokens are effectively been spent to access the service, and I know that you guys also have like a burn element in your sustainability model. Open question is like, why didn't you decide to maybe burn the tokens after the use? Is there a specific reason why that is not happening? Why is there a specific need for the tokens to be basically not be burned but still be able to be put into circulation?
For that one, I actually need to double check with the team of the exact reasonings for some of that. There's a few different ways for that. I think there's one option where it's like you kind of swap the data tokens. I believe we also have another option where it's more the mechanism you described, where it's like the tokens is like immediately burned, and the transaction hash is what you use to like ASIAX to like prove that you bought it. And so I'll study. I personally need to get back on that. I think it might be something to do either with gas or just like how like optimizing easy for the user. But yeah, don't have the full explanation. And they talk to like our smart contract developer on that exact mechanism.
It's also worth noting that the data tokens and spending data tokens doesn't have to be in Ocean, right? You can post your data set or your algorithm to be consumed in whatever coin you'd like. This could be Ethereum, this could be a stable coin like USDC or USDC. Ocean is an option. But the exact burn mechanism and reasoning behind it, I don't have full clarity on that. That's something we can maybe do in the next AMA.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was just a question that I got, but it makes total sense. I mean, if you kind of like want to burn the token, you can just like take it out of circulation and not put it in the market. And again, um, okay, so I have, maybe just to close, I think you guys, maybe if you guys want to spend a few words on the last news that you put out, that is the you revoke control over the contract. So basically, all the remaining ocean tokens have been minted. So if you want to say a few words about this, I mean, this is kind of like the latest news, and I thought you maybe wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, it's cool news. It's been a really long-term goal of Ocean Protocol as a thesis of what we want to accomplish. This kind of turns into the topic of decentralization and what this truly means. 90% of every DeFi protocol isn't actually decentralized. The point is decentralization means no single point of failure. So as this pertains to Ocean Protocol, as of May 2023, 100% of the Ocean token supply has been minted, with the proceeds being deposited into the Ocean DAO multi-signature wallet with 7 signees. These signees make up Ocean core team members, community members, and founders of other Web3 projects, with the core team members being the minority of the signees, right? The final allocation, or the total contract mechanism maximum of Ocean token contract is 1.41 billion. This number is in correlation with the total atomic mass of the ocean on Earth. This kind of goes back a number of years, where in 2019, I want to say 613.1 million Ocean was minted, with the majority of tokens being distributed to acquirers, community, grants, foundation, administrative expenses, so on and so forth. This was a single mint in 2019, which represented a little more than 40%, I want to say 43% of the total allowable token supply, leaving this remaining to be minted. This kind of takes control out of our hands, and leaves it up to the entire community and people to develop long-term growth, utility, and sustainability, right, of the protocol. So steps towards decentralization, really positive. This was great as a team, right, to know that we're kind of all in this together. No one can predict the future, right? But this was a good accomplishment from the core team for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I recognize the importance of handing over the contract, and I really appreciate you guys for being like fully transparent in this. What I can say from personal experience that I've read several of your blog posts is that I've had a hard time finding a protocol that has been so rigorous in just like putting out content about what you guys are doing every time you are coming out with a new initiative or with any news. And so that's I would say really appreciated from a reader's perspective, because you always know what's going on basically behind the curtains that you're maybe not seeing, but you will like be able to understand. And maybe let me close by asking you, what do you think are the biggest challenges, bear market apart, you think Ocean might face in near and medium term, apart from uh, the obvious cyclicity of this market that we appreciate every time we get into a bull and a bear market, and maybe a few words for anyone that wants to be involved in Ocean.
Yeah, the best ideas and the best products and the best building comes in the bear markets, right? So this has been time to us to really look internally and say, how can we make the end user experience better, and how can we educate this to the masses, right? Nothing scales without a concrete understanding. And regardless of this crypto winter we've been seeing, where things are kind of stagnant, maybe through dashboards and through analytics and seeing price movements, we're seeing a lot of interest in people wanting to build applications with AI and using blockchain. We're seeing a plethora of data scientists that want to compete and showcase their skills to help with their career resumes and just help, understanding putting data to work, right, and interacting with Ocean. So we're seeing a lot of organic interest, right, and this is kind of with the thesis that we know it's a bear market, and we know that people aren't going to be as interested on Twitter. People aren't going to be very active. People are kind of ignoring it, but it doesn't quite matter because these are long-term goals, right? So the more time that we have to be able to polish what we have and offer this to a data scientist, to a crypto enthusiast, or to an application developer, the better. We're seeing good traction, ways to get involved with Ocean. The first step would be to join our community. We have really awesome Discord admins and Telegram admins, and super engaged on Twitter. And our blog posts really point to what we just talked about, of token allocation or token contract revocation, right? There's a concept overview blog post, and there's a technical blog post that goes into all these details about what it is, why it happened, what this means for the protocol, what this means for the long-term vision. Data farming is a way to earn capital and residual income on your tokens, right? This is a way to interact with the protocol and be able to earn with Ocean as a crypto enthusiast. For data scientists, right, these challenges roll out just about every other week, trying to get more and trying to expand the platform and where we are interacting with other protocols and other data challenge sites. These are ways to practice your Python, practice your data analysis skills. Um, yeah, there's endless ways about how you can interact with the community, very accepting, and we're open to new ideas, right? It's not just we have one service and we have one product, and if you don't use it, so bad. Ocean Protocol is an experiment, right? It's an ongoing experiment. What we do in 5 years might not be anything related to what we do now, but we know that we learned and we saw what works, we saw what didn't work, and what sticks will hopefully lead to adoption.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say in terms of kind of major risks that we have, I think regulatory risk is kind of obviously one of the biggest potential headwinds on both ends for us. Obviously, everyone knows well the potential for on the crypto side, but I think also underrated is the potential for regulatory capture on kind of the AI side, where you might see a lot of the kind of established proprietary foundation model providers and kind of established data platforms locking the customers in, really appealing to governments hey, AI is scary and they need to be highly regulated. They need to have a strict licensing regimen for who's allowed to even create new ones. And I think that would just be a major mistake if we went that direction, because open source and allowing this is the best way to combat those safety concerns is with full transparency, everyone being involved in the process. And so I think, and another real major part along with that is kind of complacency. And I think it's a risk for kind of everyone involved, where it could be very easy to just I'm just going to use kind of Meta. I'm just going to use OpenAI or Microsoft and just stick with these foundation models, these established platforms. I'm just going to build all my infrastructure there because it's easy and convenient. But we could easily barrel towards a very similar problem we have now, where a few major corporations retain all of our data. They have all of our access to our personal data and our models, and we're completely locked in because we can't access it or be able to compete with it at all. And so I think it's important for people not to be complacent and just accept that kind of all our lives are going to be run by a handful of powerful corporations with access to models. People should want to be more bold, try out new frameworks that kind of real that while they may be scary and new, that they have a much higher potential to allow pure democratization of access to these models and to kind of access to data. And so I think a real danger is people need to continue to be bold right now. There's an opportunity to change to multiple paths of how we can go down. People need to be bold to try out these open frameworks as opposed to just doing what's convenient and easy.
Yeah, the path, and this goes with the thesis that the future of artificial intelligence is decentralized and it is open source. And this world that we want to live in, where there's a million different micro LLMs that solve these niche tasks and niche problems, they're going to be owned by the individual and the task that's being handed, right? They're not going to be owned by a private, for-profit corporate entity. Right now, these foundation models like Bard or ChatGPT from OpenAI, they're owned and they're for profit, right? And all that data that we put into it is never owned by us, touched by us, or even really seen by us, right? So this thesis goes into it's going to be open source and it's going to be private, owned by the users, and curated that way, for more of like a horizontal business economy as opposed to a trickle down or a top down approach as we see in current day in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally resonate. I totally resonate with your point, and I think this also makes a nice kind of like circles back to how we actually opened the call, talking about why AI needs crypto and the other way around. Um, Q&A from the audience as well.
Yeah, just roll it back a bit, Ricardo. You dropped out there, but I think you was pretty much saying we can open up to a Q&A, right?
Yeah, sorry. I was getting a call.
If anybody's
Yeah,
interested.
sorry, I was getting a call. That's a problem with doing Twitter Spaces on the phone.
Yeah, exactly. Just a quick caveat, right? No price speculation or like securities related questions. Obviously, let's keep it nice and civil. So yeah, if anybody has a question, just raise your hand and we'll get you up. Okay, I'll go first. So in terms of the social curation aspect of Ocean, right, is there any factor of being, I guess, early on a good data set? So if the objective function, like the core value behind Ocean is that of surfacing quality data, are users who do this early on, are they rewarded better in any way?
Yeah, those that are kind of like the first to stake on the data set that kind of gets traction, they'll kind of get they're rewarded like I think pro rata based on like their percentage of like their stake as compared to both total on the single data set and as well as everyone in staking on the ecosystem. And so yeah, those that are able to kind of find like data sets that like we're going to get the traction and are first and are able to kind of have a larger percentage of the stake before others start to pile in will receive like higher percentage of like the active data farming rewards.
But isn't the stake based on also, so like yeah, it's the stake of the Ocean on that data set, right? So if I find it early on, then obviously I'm going to be exposed to the rewards for a longer period of time. But if somebody comes in after me with a far bigger bag, then they could just outweigh me, I guess you could say, right? Or is that not how?
They would outweigh your allocation of what fee share you get, right? Depending on the total amount of what you allocate the data set to.
I see, yeah.
So it's almost like, you own 60% of the apartment building versus the person who owns 20% of the apartment building. Those residuals will be divvied up as that is. So no one can get pushed out, right? It's just it's quantified and tiered based on allocation numbers. If that answers the question, I don't know if I did it.
No, that was good. Okay, so we've got a question. Ark, you're up. Let's see. Ark, you're a speaker. You can ask your question if you still want to ask it.
Hey. Yeah, I had a question about how does Ocean ensure the privacy of the data sets if it's on an NFT? I was wondering how that works.
So privacy comes from the ability to own the data set and you are the publisher, right? And then as we mentioned in the market walkthrough, you can put parameters on who can access your data, how long they can access the data set, when, why, and it's always owned by the original publisher. So privacy is done through these tool mechanisms in ERC20 and ERC2721 and all these other, methods that come through Ethereum blockchain. Privacy comes from the owner of the data being able to publish it and always be the owner of it and never give up the access unwillingly, right? Everything is provides optionality, and choice. Privacy.
So just expanding on that quickly. So the data NFT obviously has like root access over the permissions, right? So if they've minted the data in a token and then somebody's using that, and then let's just say for whatever reason, the data NFT owner then wants to wants to remove the data set, they can do that, right? It's within their power.
To remove it from the Ocean market, yes. I think it's worth noting that Ocean never actually touches or holds any of your data. Instead, these are tool mechanisms for the actual individual or the publisher themselves to own it as a token, as an NFT, as a non-fungible asset.
Mm-hmm.
And the user can also, if they want, they can also list their asset in the purgatory, which basically just make so it won't their asset won't be displayed on Ocean Market, so people won't be able to discover it.
Delete the NFT. That's the whole point of the blockchain, is it's immutable. But Purgatory is the place, if you were to want to delist or want to take it off, you would put it in Purgatory, which makes it unavailable for you to purchase, visibility, access, so forth.
Brilliant. Okay, cool.
So
I get
help, Mark, or maybe there's a question that stems out of the question.
Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
So I guess then would the data set be stored somewhere off chain, and then the NFT is just like a pointer?
Yes, exactly. So basically, when you publish the data NFT on chain, it's the actual all the meta information is directly published on chain in encrypted form. So then there's a microservice called provider, which anyone can, when they choose Ocean Market, they can either choose to use Trust OPF as their provider, or you can run your own. And so when someone wants to access the data set, provider will unencrypt the URL and stream kind of like where the data set is held. So whether it be in an S3 bucket or on Filecoin or on Arweave. So the purchaser never actually sees the link, and for that, it's like it just points to where, like you said, where it just points to where it is off chain, and at the moment of like access, it's encrypted by the microservice, which then streams the data set to the consumer.
Interesting. All right. Thank you.
Have you seen any use cases in terms of like data NFTs being owned by multiple entities, not just like a single entity?
Well, this new Ethereum proposal, ERC, I think 6551, it allows for an NFT to be, or a wallet to be spun out through an NFT. And this will allow an entire business entity to be wrapped into a single NFT, right? And to do that with multiple parties could be done through access control, right? And just adding DIDs into who gets access to what. It's almost like a indirect way to KYC with verifying without oversharing. All you need is the appropriate wallet address to be approved, and more can be added.
But the cool aspect is like, since we're using leveraging NFTs like as a standard, a lot of the like kind of tools have been built around for NFTs for trading can just be leveraged here. So hey, just if you want to like split ownership, just have the NFT be owned by like a multi-sig wallet, or there's kind of various tools that can be used for fractionalizing NFT ownership. And so there are a few different ways you can go about kind of sharing ownership on an asset, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel to do that. You can just leverage what's already available from the NFT tooling.
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to ask too. That's really interesting. Brilliant. Okay. Well, yeah, if nobody else has got any questions, then I guess that's everything from our side. And unless there's anything else you guys wanted to touch upon to finish out, Ricardo, any words?
Yeah, I think I'd say we touched on a lot here. Space is recorded, so people can use this as a resource. Further questions or further engagement, I would point people listening to this space or recording to the Ocean Protocol Discord, the Ocean Protocol blog post, which is blog.oceanprotocol.com, and interact with us, right? Ask questions. There's a lot here that might be confusing at the eyeball, but with a brief explanation, brief reading, tutorials, explainers, it should start making a bit more sense. So yeah, community channels, data challenge, participant platforms, D-Sites is a place that we hold them all, but the website and oceanprotocol.com kind of digs into all of these features, functions, engagement mechanisms, calls to actions, so on and so forth. And thank you guys. Thank you guys for having us. This was fun to walk through all the different inner workings of the protocol.
Likewise, thanks for being here. Yeah, happy to do it again if and when.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been really a pleasure, first of all, to actually do an article on Ocean, and then have the opportunity to have you guys for the AMA.
We might be losing some connection service here.
Oh, then sorry. Is that my side?
No, I think you're good.
Okay. Well, I would say I don't know, Mason, if you have any closing thoughts. Otherwise, I think we're good to close.
Okay, guys. I feel like appropriate to wrap up here. If host or Ricardo wants to say one last word, this was fun.
Thanks, everyone.
No, brilliant. That's all good. Everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, check out Ocean. And the article that Ricardo put out is a very good deep dive into the mechanics in the token itself. So if you're not familiar, definitely check that out. Having said that, have a good rest of your day.
Thanks,
guys. Cheers.
Have a good one. See ya.
Cheers.